Welcome to Lesson 3. In this lesson, we'll be exploring how to develop strategic thinking in organizations. In the first lesson, we noted the importance of strategic thinking and leadership within the civil service. One of the most important areas we will work through in this lesson is the differences between strategic thinking and strategic planning. Just like leadership and management, we need both in organizations. But they are different, and they serve different purposes. In this lesson, we will explore the differences, and also look at the best uses of strategic thinking in your organization. We will also talk about how to develop the strategic capacity of your organization, and more importantly, the people in it. At the end of this lesson, there will be some material on a case study which we will be discussing at a webinar after the completion of the e-courses. But, first of all, let's go back to basics. Why do we need to be strategic? Haven't we got by okay so far? There are a few reasons. Change is now a constant for us, and we need to understand it at least broadly. For example, technology is an area many of us struggle with, but we need to know what it can deliver for the civil service. Globalization, we don't just exist within national borders anymore, but through trade and diplomacy and aid relationships. We have complex relationships with many other countries, so we need a broader understanding of trends and issues. The pressure to use resources more efficiently is common to all civil services as demands increase and citizen expectations rise. We have to think cleverly about the way we deliver services. Workforce changes are also an important driver. For example, we may have an aging workforce with insufficient younger workers to replace them as they retire. We may have a younger workforce with high expectations for themselves, so we need to understand skills and how to motivate people for their jobs. Now let's try to unpack the differences between strategic thinking and strategic planning by looking at two short videos. The first video is a short 1:50 min animated clip that explains the difference between strategic planning, which is a process, and strategic thinking, which is a mindset. The second video is also short at under 3 minutes, and it explains how leaders can shift their mindset, or way of thinking, from operational to strategic. Take a few minutes to watch both of these videos before you progress to the next slide.
Simply getting your work done doesn't automatically position you for success. Today, you, your colleagues, and every person in your organization is expected to think strategically. But what exactly is strategic thinking? And how does it differ from strategic planning? Strategic planning is the process by which leaders set the direction for your organization to move forward. During strategic planning, leaders decide on a path to success that guides how people set priorities, allocate resources, and plan how to achieve key goals. Consider it your organizational action plan. Strategic thinking is how you and your colleagues help create that path to success. It requires that you put the smallest decisions in the context of the organization's broader long-term goals. To think strategically, you'll need to keep alert to your industry, your customers, and your competitors, and to frame your decisions based on thinking for the future, rather than simply reacting to the present. So, how do you start to think more strategically? You start by pushing past your assumptions about the way things work. Keep your eyes open for opportunities to better serve your customers, and use these insights to guide the way you make choices in support of your organization's overarching goals. Your decisions make a difference. When you think strategically, you're putting yourself and your organization on the smart path to success.
Do you want to develop the habit of thinking and acting more strategically on a daily basis? If you do, you must shift your focus from a purely operational mode into a more long-term frame of mind. If you're addicted to checking off day-to-day tasks responding to emergencies, or are stuck fighting fires rather than preventing them, then it's time to put the fire hose away and take a step back to survey the overall situation. Sharon is a great example of this concept. Sharon is a sales manager for a mid-sized company. Her team's sales numbers dropped off dramatically again last month. Upper management is asking a lot of questions about why the targets weren't hit. Sharon is feeling the pressure, and her first impulse is to do something fast and make up for the shortfall. In other words, put out the fire. But the strategic response would be to gather her team, discuss why the numbers aren't being met, and find a solution that will bring the numbers up next month and on into the future. If you find yourself caught in the daily activity trap or always putting out fires, consider asking yourself and reflecting on these basic questions. Why am I doing these activities? Who am I serving? What are the truly important value-added projects and tasks? What do my customers want from me in the future? How is my environment changing, and what does that change mean to me? How can I better prepare myself for the future so that I don't become obsolete and irrelevant? What can I do now that is different and will produce a payoff in the future? When people are in the heat of the moment, it's difficult to see beyond the issue. Everyday strategy is a habit that must be developed over time. Begin with setting aside some time each day to reflect on strategic ideas and consider how you can add value to your organization in the long term. By operating more strategically, you will be prepared to successfully capitalize on the forces and events that are shaping your world.
If we could sum up the differences between strategic thinking and strategic planning in one way, it would be this. Strategic thinking is primarily a mindset that leads us towards what we are going to do, and why we are going to do it. It tells us the end goal and the purpose. For example, imagine a police superintendent who is concerned about the high number of people killed in car and motorbike accidents on our roads. Data tells him that a high number of the people killed are not wearing seat belts or helmets. The officer decides that what he is going to do in his area is to have an enforcement campaign targeting motorists with no helmets or seat belts. This will be publicized on local TV and remind people what they must do. His purpose in doing this is to reduce the number of deaths on roads. Beneath his rank, there will be officers tasked with implementing this. They will need a specific plan and a process to support this. For example, they will need to know where are the worst places for accidents in the city. Is there a time of day that is worst? They will need to assign a number of officers on specific shifts at specific places. They will need to measure whether this strategy has reduced the number of road deaths. Another way of thinking about it is this. The central question in strategic thinking in organizations is, are we heading in the right direction? That sounds simple, but to answer that question you have to have a clear sense of the organization's longer-term purpose. And you have to have data that tells you if you are on track or need to change. In strategic planning, we already have the longer-term purpose of the organization. Instead, our question is much more narrow: are we using the right process? In strategic planning, we may only have a one-year outlook, so the plan will look quite operational and specific. It will be tasks and deadlines, and it will say who is responsible for delivering particular elements of it. The need to use strategic thinking has become a requirement for modern leaders. When the Harvard Business Review conducted a survey of 10,000 leaders, 97% of them said that one of the most critical skills for leaders was strategic thinking. Why is this? Because in the modern world, the issues we face are complex and have many facets. They often require special expertise from multiple sources to develop the best response overall. Also, governments increasingly need to focus on longer-term issues. In countries like Cambodia where there is rapid urbanization, infrastructure like roads and housing are quickly becoming inadequate for the needs of the population. With issues like these, often you need to forecast up to 20 years ahead in order to ensure that funds will be available for these high-cost projects at the right time. Strategic thinking can also be used when there is a particularly tough problem to work through that requires a creative mind. One of the ideas this lesson will teach is that strategic thinking can be learned. Once you have been using strategic thinking for a while, the steps we are about to go through may not need to be as distinct as the descriptions in these slides. It will seem more automatic as you become more familiar with the process. But for now, let's break down the process into smaller components. We start with defining the current state, generally one that is a problem in some way. What exists now in the internal and external environment. For example, we may know that citizens are very dissatisfied with our counter services, but we can see some positive take-up of our online services. We then look to imagine a different desired future state. How do we want this to be different in the future? If our agency provides services to citizens, we want them to experience high levels of satisfaction. We know that demand for counter services are declining, especially in cities, and citizens want to be able to get services outside business hours over the phone or online. So, we might imagine a future where we divert some of our resources to a stronger call center presence in the short term while we work on a phone app that will enable people to complete their services with their smartphone. The third step is about broadening our understanding of the current environment. Using the previous example, we can't be too quick to move resources away from the front counters, otherwise waiting times will become too long and citizens will be even more unhappy. Also, phone infrastructure for call centers costs quite a bit. Maybe we can partner with other agencies and the call center can answer calls for a number of agencies. This is very possible. All you need is the right script for the phone operator to answer the question. Or maybe you think about giving a small incentive for people to do their business online or via their smartphone, such as a small discount. The fourth step is about critically assessing underlying obstacles. We keep trying to identify the root cause of the problem, and ask why. If our front offices are too busy, maybe the process is too complex, and we can simplify it so it is quicker. Maybe there are times of the day that are busier than others, such as when the office first opens, and we can ask other staff to help just for the first hour till the numbers drop. Maybe people are not confident using other ways of doing business, such as online, and we can give them more help, or use transition strategies such as a self-help kiosk in the waiting area where they can be assisted. The fifth step is the stage where we are heading towards developing some options or solutions. There might be strategies that have worked in other places or similar departments, that could be adapted to fit your own unique situation. There might be some very new way of doing things that an employee has thought of, or that a citizen has suggested. It could be worth trying a small experiment to test out these ideas. At this stage, decisions are made about what to do in priority order. We will explore more on this throughout the course, particularly in the lessons on innovation and during the problem-driven iterative adaptation (PDI-A) lessons. The final phase is to develop and implement tactics consistent with our priorities. We use the word SMART. For example, first we might survey our customers about their preferences. We might advise our customers we are offering a 5% discount to do business online at. We send your bill by email, and you pay online and on time. Let's say it will take us 4 months to set up the billing system for that to occur. Then we will implement that. Then we see how much staff resource that frees up to see if it allows any capacity to extend our phone service. Also, we will measure the cost of offering the 5% discount. So, we have a clear strategy with stages and timeframes that should deliver a benefit to citizens and, after the initial setup costs, a financial return to the agency. Having looked at strategic thinking steps, we will now look at strategic planning processes to help us put some of those strategic visions into action. Strategic planning takes place in a shorter time frame, no more than 3 years maximum, and generally with smaller objectives. For example, a department within a general department may decide to undertake a strategic planning process to ensure their efforts are better aligned to the vision and strategy outlined by the Minister and General Departmental Director General. Firstly, it is about setting broad goals and objectives. Let's say there might be some broad goals such as completion of the Human Resource Management Information System rollout, or reduction in administrative costs by 5%. In order to work out what is practical and feasible, we are going to need data. We are going to need hard data, facts, statistics, financial tables, and customer numbers, and we are going to need what we call soft data. Soft data is the important input and opinions of employees, customers and stakeholders. They are the ones who are the users of our business processes or who are most affected by them, so they will have a view about what works well, and what doesn't. Stakeholders may be a new term, but it is one you will be hearing a lot through these lessons. It means someone who has a stake or interest in the outcome of the reform, who can influence a change, and or who is affected by a change, or thinks they are. Later in the e-course, you will undertake a lesson that will assist you with some specific strategies for identifying and engaging with stakeholders. Next, we use a strategy called a SWOT analysis. It means that we identify our strengths and weaknesses as a group, and what threats and opportunities exist in our environment. For example, having a very stable staff group can be both a strength and a weakness. On the positive side, they understand the business very well and we might expect that they function well as a team. But sometimes stable teams can resist change and new ways of doing things, so it is important to assess each situation on its merits. When we consider the threats and opportunities in our environment, COVID represents a recent example. As well as the public health issues, it has had a major impact on the economy of many countries, especially those who are major exporters like Cambodia. On the other hand, it has provided an opportunity to see how quickly many organizations were able to change to have their employees work from home. In the further stage, when it comes to formulating the plan, it is important to distinguish between what is urgent and what is important. Sometimes these two are confused in the civil service. It is true we need to be responsive to the needs of ministers and deal with urgent issues. However, often important issues get forgotten or given a much lower priority because they are not urgent. For example, part of a plan might indicate the need to provide detailed planning advice to the minister urgently on a development proposal within 1 month, but the important work of planning road infrastructure must still be able to continue. If you are considering how to determine the importance or urgency of a particular issue, remember the wise words of former U.S. President Dwight D. Eisenhower: what is important is seldom urgent, and what is urgent is seldom important. It is also important whatever we put in our plan can be measured. Sometimes the measurement is easy, while others might be more complex. For example, deliver 90% of planning approvals for residential housing less than 10 stories high in less than 3 months. Every good strategic plan will specify the overall strategic purpose and goals, but also be clear about what are the tasks to be completed, what are the time frames, and who is accountable for each task. It should be easy for anyone to pick up the document and know what is being done, and who is in charge of each task. Finally, each plan should have a review at regular intervals. How often those reviews are might depend on a number of factors, including the level of risk associated with a particular project or plan. Often there are key milestones, such as the completion of a procurement process, that will determine review dates. This is just a broad outline of the strategic planning process, and to sum up, just like leaders and managers, we need both strategic thinking and strategic planning in our organizations. Here is a little chart that sums up some of the differences between strategic thinking and strategic planning. Strategic thinking points us in the right direction, and through use of this skill, We can develop some ideas or generate solutions to address the issues we want to address. Just to clarify, you will note that strategic thinking is listed as an individual competency. That is true. It is a skill, therefore, it is individually based. This does not mean, though, that the process of strategic thinking must be a solitary one. Strategic thinkers will often have great ideas by themselves, but they build on these by working with others. In fact, they enjoy sharing and developing their ideas. Strategic planning, on the other hand, is a defined process that allows us to create the actual steps which will get our projects delivered and achieve our goals. It is through strategic planning that people and resources are assigned to make sure that outcomes are achieved. So, if strategic thinking is an individual skill, can it be developed in an organization? The answer is yes, if you as the leader are prepared to go on a journey yourself and model certain behaviors in your organization. The first recommended strategy is to create some time every week in your diary, maybe 2 hours, if possible, where you have no appointments and no commitments. This is very difficult given our busy days. However, as senior leaders, we get so caught up in doing things that we have no time for thinking. The second is refining sense of organizational purpose. What do you do in this time? Think about what is going well. Think about what worries you and why. Think about how bigger changes in society are impacting your organization and how you might need to respond. The third is have conversations with a range of people. Some people find it easier to think things through by talking, and this is where a mentor can be valuable. Maybe for a person in a senior position, it can seem difficult to find a mentor. However, I think most of us know someone we could approach. It could be someone in the private sector or a university that we have met, or perhaps a former colleague whose work you admire who is now retired. The key qualities you are looking for is someone you can trust, and someone whose advice you will find useful and challenging. You also need to be continually asking the core question, what are we here for? For example, you could say we build roads, or you could say we make it possible for Cambodian people to travel on safe roads that help improve their business opportunities and personal lives. Also, have conversations with a range of people about what is working well, and what needs improvement. Make sure you expose yourself to different opinions, not just from within the organization, department and/or general department. Interdepartmental and interagency perspectives are important to include in your thinking. Host a small function for stakeholders and ask for their views. Conduct a staff survey. Get citizen input. Number 5 is important, but there is a secret to this one. You don't need to do all the research yourself. You can outsource it to someone in your department or general department. As a director or a director general, or senior officer, you probably don't have time to keep up with research relevant to your field. So, every month or so, take time to meet with someone who can give you a summary of the latest research and data trends you need to be aware of. Number 6 might have a different name in Asia, but Tiger Teams is a good name for a good concept. The idea of a Tiger Team is to take one of your most challenging problems, and give it to a small group of smart thinkers in the organization to work out. Then give them 3 days and tell them they have to come up with a range of solutions in that time. They will learn the skills very quickly. One real-life example of how to use a Tiger Team was in a small legal bureaucracy where the organizational budget had been slashed by 12%. The CEO sent a small group away, with the brief to work out how these budget cuts could be implemented with least impact on client services. The following year, they won a National Innovation Award. We are now coming to the end of this self-paced lesson, but before we finish, we just want to briefly mention the case study we will be discussing in the webinar after the completion of the e-courses. For young children, having access to good quality early learning experiences such as kindergartens and preschools is a good predictor of their later success at school. Children who don't have access to these enriching experiences are immediately disadvantaged when they start school. The study looks at the impacts of the government's strategy of rolling out 500 new community preschools. Remember, these are different from government preschools. Specifically, the study looked at whether enrollments increased overall, and the impacts on the development of children. When we talk about development, we mean both their intellectual development and their social-emotional development. A final reminder also that in the case summary version there are 4 questions at the end that we will use for discussion in the webinar. These questions don't appear in the original publication. If you click through to the next slide, you will be able to view a short video that shows some of the very positive aspects of preschools.
Vì dương miền xã la riêng xăm bể ốc có pra cột cồn với chỉ tu tóc anh chẳng cọt chui màu hay con sa dương nâng có màu tiền phê liệt biệt man pha pa rồi xã la dương ta sát con sát coi sát đôi kia cha ấy màu chẳng việc khơi miền là bắp tóc tay bên xã la chẳng mấy việc chỗ chặt màu
tay dạ cũng miền bị giao van cầu nhắm nấu vậy không mấy van châu riêng van chạy đằng viên nấu chật tè cầu hiền lạ tàu đà đào bà mặm bà chun về bậc trắng về tàu tàu nhom man vừa cả tè là chả mà bên gần chơi giờ chụp riệp xưa bà mạ dây ta hay mà bên riêng ở nhom đạp chụp riêng một tay nặng hay kỳ ta cái chơi cầu khâu ai cầu mà bên chơi riệp riệp bà mạ thật chơi này chơi nụ ao nặng nặng chặt thà cầu riêng chơi từ một
ในสาขาคมนั้นคือช่วยนมดาลบ่าเอาเขมรนั้นคือบานโจเรียนที่อายุบ่าอายุใบบุญถึง1-3 ឆ្នាំมาให้เคยปีศาจสำคัญในการบังเรียนตั้งปีเขมรในศึกษานั้นคือสำคัญคือช่วยนำไปเอากฎหมายตัวบานในการอบรมโดยกฎหมายในตามที่ครองเชียงรายเพราะฉะนั้นที่กฎหมายวัดบานโจมาในศึกษาจึงคือกอดเมนบูทานคือกบกรอนแต่งพนายอัศแต่งพนายเล็กผลนึงไอเรียนจอบอัฐอมนึงมาชมศึกษาบาล
Please click on the link to access this short video that outlines some of the important work of preschools in Cambodia. After that, you may click on a short article giving some background on an initiative to expand children's access to preschool in Cambodia. This article contains the 4 key questions we will be discussing at a later webinar. You can print it out and read it at a later time if you wish. Following this, there is one final slide to complete the lesson. In this lesson, we have looked at the need to be strategic in the modern age, and explored the difference between strategic thinking and strategic planning. Strategic thinking is an individual skill that can be learned over time, while strategic planning is an organizational process that applies to shorter time frames. We also looked when it is appropriate to use strategic thinking. The 6 stages of strategic thinking can be summarized as a need to broaden understanding of current state, imagine different future desired state, broaden understanding of environment, critically assess underlying obstacles, brainstorm high-level options and priorities, and develop tactics within overall priorities. The 6 steps in strategic planning processes can be summarized as follows: set goals and objectives, gather people and information, perform SWOT analysis, formulate strategic plan, implement plan and monitor performance. Finally, you have had a chance to have a look at a video on Cambodian preschools that will be the subject of a later webinar discussion. There is also an article for you to print out and read if you want to. We will be examining this case study from a strategic thinking perspective. We thank you for your participation in the C-Learning lesson. We would like to ask you to complete a mini quiz of this lesson. We will see you again in another lesson. Samarkand.